Okay. Hey everybody, my name is Bilal. I work at the McMillan Institute at the Jung Center, and this summer I'm going around Houston and talking to educators and scholars whose work is in line with the Jung Center's mission to explore meaning in everyday life. So today I'm at Rice University to talk to Dr. Vida Yao, who is a philosopher who works on ethics and moral psychology. So Dr. Yao, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Oh, can I say my other title?
Yeah, sure.
I am also the moral philosopher at the Door Institute for New Leaders.
Okay, cool. So just to begin, and to give them sort of a background on you, could you tell me a little bit about how you became interested in philosophy and ethics and moral psychology in particular?
Oh, holy smokes, okay.
A broad question to start.
How did I get interested in philosophy? I mean, I think I got interested in philosophy in the way that every human gets interested in philosophy. Philosophy begins in wonder, and children wonder about everything. And I guess I didn't realize that it was a thing that you could actually do with your life until I got to college. And then it still didn't seem to me like something that you could do with your life. I mean, it's something that you do all the time, but I didn't think you could get paid for it. And then, you know, I got to grad school, and I still thought you couldn't get paid for it, and now I'm getting paid for it, and I still think you can't get paid for it. But yeah, I don't think that there's a point where I thought, oh, I'm interested in philosophy. I mean, there were points where I became interested in particular philosophers, or like a particular style of doing philosophy, or particular questions. But yeah, and then with ethics and moral psychology, there's actually a very specific answer for that, which is that I was interested in the philosophy of mind, just questions of consciousness and perception and memory and things like that. And then I went to grad school actually thinking that I was going to study that, and I still love philosophy of mind. But I realized I wanted to do ethics and moral psychology when I took a class with my advisor, Susan Wolf, on the philosophy of Bernard Williams. Okay. And we read Ethics and the Limits of Philosophy, and I had never liked moral philosophy before reading Williams. And then I read Williams, and I thought, God, okay, ethics and moral psychology. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So what is your work focused on these days? I mean, ethics and moral psychology is obviously a broad title, so what questions are you interested in particular?
So at the most general level, I guess I'm just interested in why it's so hard to be a good person. Okay. I wrote my dissertation on acrasia, or acrasia, which is just the phenomenon of seeming to know that something that you're doing is not the thing you should be doing. Seeming to know, being pretty confident that you know that that's what you should be doing, and then doing it anyway. And it's like it's just puzzling how that can be psychologically possible. So that's what I'm most broadly interested in. And then more specifically, right now I'm working on a project where I'm trying to characterize and then defend an interpersonal conception of grace or gracious love. I can say more about that, or if you have specific questions. I know you read the paper.
Yeah, so. Yeah. So I want to talk about the paper you published on grace.
Forthcoming.
Forthcoming. So I think it would be helpful if you could like frame the problem, right? So,
sure. You could probably frame the problem.
Should I?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess it seems that love, which is an emotion fraught with excess and ambivalence, as Martha Nussbaum says, can lead us to sort of, or can blind us to the flaws, the moral vices of the people that we love. And so you want to, I guess, defend a conception of love in which we are attentive to and cognizant of those flaws, but and you want to reject the views that sort of try and look past those flaws, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, maybe in your own words?
Yeah, sure. No, that was really perfect. I mean, so it's not, you know, so the idea that love is fundamentally about attention rather than benevolence, for example, is a view that more recently was defended and discussed by a philosopher named Iris Murdoch, who was a wonderful philosopher, also a wonderful novelist. And it's like her centenary or something like that coming up. So she thought that, so I like this idea of love being kind of an excess or something like that. I mean, she thought that one kind of fundamental problem with love is that it's often a projection of one's sort of own desires and fantasies and things like that. So it's not just that, you know, you see a person and for their sake, you want to overlook their flaws.
Right.
It's actually that a lot of the times you're doing it for your own sake, you know, in some narrow sense of your own sake. Like you would love if this person, you know, just, so she gives this famous example of M and D, a mother-in-law and a daughter. And the mother-in-law looks at her daughter-in-law and just sees, you know, this kind of bumbling, unsophisticated, uninteresting girl. And then Murdoch describes how she goes through a process of really looking again, thinking about her own desires, maybe her desires for her son to do better than this girl. Maybe she's got kind of, there's sort of a classist undertone. So, you know, maybe she thinks, oh, this girl's she's just not from the right family. And through that kind of reflective process where Murdoch wants to point out that you can do that without anybody, you know, knowing that you're up to anything. It's this very private thing that we do.
Right.
She begins seeing past her own ego, and she starts seeing D for the good person that she actually seems to be. Now, I think that you can do that with a person, and then when you start seeing them more clearly, you actually see things that are not so great.
Right.
And then this just gives rise to this puzzle, which is that, okay, so I'm supposed to love somebody attentively, but now I'm looking at them, and like, who is that?
Right.
Who is that? But I think we still do, we can still love them and not love them in spite of their flaws, or love them while like focusing just on their good things. I think all of those sort of can fail the relationship in certain ways. So the project in talking about grace is this thought that, well, gracious love it outruns the merit or the excellence of its object. And so that's what I'm writing about.
So one question I had when I was reading your paper was, so you talk about grace, and we can define that, I think, in a bit, but do you want to, so you don't want to say that we love a person in spite of their flaws, right? Do you want to say that we love a person in part because of their flaws, because it like makes them who they are in some way?
Yeah, I mean, that might be one way of putting it. It's actually kind of difficult to know exactly what phrasing is right for it, but yeah, there's some respect in which, you know, when you, maybe, I mean, usually it's in the context where you already love a person, and then you just, you know, you learn something about them, and, you know, you kind of have to warm up to the idea. So you can start off with like the easy ones, right? Like the easy ones, like they get like mad when they're hungry, or like they, you know, or, you know, they just do like these like stupid little things that you notice and you're like why? But then, you know, when you start seeing those qualities as part of that person and part of their life and part of the richness of who a person is, like I don't know, I just experience it as often just amplifying my affection for them.
Okay.
Often, not always. But
so I think, I just wonder, like, it seems like maybe the more moralistic people would say that the worry there is that, I mean, you're just allowing for people to be bad in that way, right? Is that what people, I don't know if that's what they're saying.
Yeah, no, definitely. The questions are really good, Bilal. Yes, so you can be very moralistic about this and say like, no, you know, there's some flaws, and you know, and we could another direction goes to push really hard, like I'm talking about these cute things, but what about the stuff that's not cute at all, right? And so someone could say like, look, those are exactly the people who don't deserve love, especially if they're like moral failings. And I think there's a couple things that I would want to say, which is that I'm not arguing for any particular action to perform. I'm not saying like, don't tell them that what they're doing is bad. I'm not saying anything like that. I think loving somebody is totally consistent with having like really difficult conversations with them.
Okay.
If it's your business. A lot of times a person's character flaws are just none of your business, even if they're your friend. And so I don't know. I don't have much sympathy with that kind of moralistic response.
Okay. So you talk about grace as a way of sort of accepting the flaws that the person has in some sense. Could you say what you mean by grace?
Yeah. So, let me think about it. It's one kind of love among many forms of love. There's many forms of love. I'm just a pluralist about forms of love. But what's distinctive about grace or gracious love, at least on my conception, is first it satisfies that first thing that we talked about, that it's attentive. Right. And the second thing it is affectionate. So it has a certain particular kind of emotional tone. So it's not like, respecting somebody, right? And it's not like feeling like the feelings of benevolence or care towards them or pity or sympathy. I think those are sort of go off in different directions. So the attitude is just, I'm going to be attentive to a person, and when I see these flaws or whatever, they amplify my affection for them.
Okay. So you also, when you talk about grace, you use the language of like grace having to do with qualities of human nature, right?
Right.
And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. And one of the, I guess, opponents of your view that you sort of talk about in your paper is this kind of neo-Kantian view that we see the person that we love and we realize they have these flaws, but we love them anyway out of love for humanity or something like that.
I see.
So,
yeah.
So
okay, I see.
The worry, I guess, is that speaking about human nature makes it easy to seem like you're making an almost Kantian kind of point.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So So I make a distinction between the Kantian project of grounding it in humanity, or like whatever Kant meant by whatever an end in itself is, and I want to make this distinction and say, look, I mean, first of all, I love Kant, so no diss to Kant. But what I'm trying to do by characterizing this is grounded in qualities of human nature is to sort of reinforce this point that what we need to do is really attend to that person, right? And so Bilal, you might be an end in yourself and you have humanity, but you've also, we live in this world and you've got all these qualities that are just the qualities of human nature, these psychological dispositions that you have that are not, they're not reducible to this other, kind of thing that you have, which grounds like your dignity and my respect for you and stuff like that. I mean, you've got, whatever, you've got all these qualities. And those are the things that I think, again, when you're attending to somebody, you notice those things about them. You notice how, they gesticulate, or you notice, what makes them sad, or you just notice all those things. And that, I mean, you can make some moves here and say that that's somehow grounded in our rational nature, but I'm not convinced.
What you want to do, because you want to preserve the point that like ultimately, if we're told that we're loved in spite of our flaws or because of our humanity or something like that, that feels off to us because we want to be loved for our personality and who we are and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay.
So do you think that? Yeah. Then these qualities of human nature that you're talking about, really what you're trying to, I guess, preserve is this kind of particularity to the individual person. Is that?
Yeah. So that's right. The particularity to that individual person, and I mean, I think that is really something deeply Kantian, too, right? But we just need to, focus on some things that I think some Kantian pictures leave out because they're so hyper focused on our rational nature. Now, so thank you for reminding me. Again, I'm pluralist about different forms of love. The kind of practical problem that sets up the paper is the thought that love should be something that brings people closer together. It should foster intimacy or connection. And that sometimes the people that we love, the reason why they are inclined to pull away is because they're ashamed of themselves. And so there's a sort of thought here that, so I talk a bit about the psychology of shame in the paper. And the thought here is something like, look, if someone's feeling ashamed of, who they are in their particularity, and it's funny the things that people will be ashamed of. I mean, they're often like extremely particular.
Right.
And they're not, their humanity or their rational nature. It's precisely like all this stupid stuff that they do while nobody's looking or whatever they're trying to forget or whatever.
That nobody even notices sometimes.
That nobody even notices sometimes. Often because we're so good at concealing, and we're highly motivated to conceal that stuff from other people. And the thought is something like, look, if you're friends with somebody like that, or you love them because they're your brother or your sister, I think parent-child relationships are different, and I think like erotic lovers, it's a little bit different, and so there's so I really focus on like brother-sister relations and friend relations, which are more egalitarian, and the thought is something like, look, if you can say to your friend or your brother or your sister, like all of it. I'll take all of it. And I see it. I'm not going to deny that you're like that, but I'm going to take all of it. Like the hope is that can alleviate some of the shame that the beloved might feel.
What do you mean when you say, this is just not completely relevant, but when you just said that a friend relationship is more egalitarian than other types, what do you mean by that?
Oh, so I just meant like in contrast to, I mean, some people are friends with their parents.
Right.
Are you friends with your parents? Oh, you don't have to start. Don't answer that. I love my parents, but they're not my friends, and like they're, we get along, but they're not my friends, and like we don't aspire to be friends with one another. That would just be so strange. I mean, sorry, no, like you can be friends with your mom if you're into it. I love my mom, but she's my mom, and there's just this like subtle, like this hierarchical thing. It's partly just she's like older than I am. It's partly, I mean, she made me. So like how, yeah, so that's a contrast there. And also, I mean, and then the contrast with like romantic lovers or erotic lovers, like I think that most people aspire to be friends with their romantic or their erotic lovers too. And so you could fold this into those relationships, but like, there's a lot of excess there that I don't talk about in the paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, I guess I want to get at what I think is a more general worry in your paper.
Yeah.
So, you're kind of criticizing some of these views for looking past or choosing to turn away some aspects of the beloved, right? And I wonder if those people do that because they want to preserve a very like rationally coherent kind of account of love. One in which, right, like, I mean,
yeah.
I think the problem that you're posing, it's one that sort of makes us feel at odds with ourselves or with our lovers, right? And so if these other views, it's like if we look past their flaws or if we turn away from them, then those flaws won't be present really, and we don't have to defend ourselves or the type of love or something like that.
Yeah. Right.
So I wonder if in the background for you, there's also just a general kind of worry about like an over-intellectualizing or rationalizing of the emotions.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, so I'm pretty intellectualist about the emotions, in a way. So I don't know that the problem is over-intellectualizing them. I think the problem is more over-rationalizing them, but with a certain conception of what rationality is, which ends up being sort of like universalized or from a very kind of high-level, third-personal point of view or something like that, and that's not my starting point in thinking about rationality. That's a good starting point to have, and we should aspire to that for certain sorts of projects, and for for certain sort of philosophical projects. Like, go on, aspire to that. But the kind of moral philosophy that I'm interested in just doesn't have that sort of aspiration. That's not to give up on rationality or intellectualism. It's just to rethink what the starting point is. And I think you're exactly right that one of my sort of deeper worries is that a lot of these views, they're coming from this point of not just this conception of rationality that I disagree with, but also this very like self-protective, like the self-protective place is unwilling to be vulnerable, right? It's like, right, and this is like a kind of, it's just what philosophers do. I mean, like I'm gonna defend myself, and I just think, look, that is so not what it is to love another person, right? To love another person is just to be insanely vulnerable to what they're up to. Insanely vulnerable. And that's why it's so hard to do, right? But yeah, so that's very astute of you to notice.
Very cool, thanks. So something that I really like about this, like these philosophy of emotion papers and books, is that, you know, we're given really compelling accounts of emotions, and you in your paper you provide a really compelling account of shame, and I read it and it's just like, I felt this like 2 days ago, you know what I mean? And I wonder if you think there's a kind of applicability or relevance to the philosophy of emotions, and whether that's why you're kind of attracted to it. Is it like these sort of
yes,
personally verifiable almost? Is that?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, I think that was, you know, the reason why I liked Williams so much, and actually the conception of shame, I mean, it borrows heavily from Williams, who's borrowing heavily from Gabriel Taylor, who's borrowing, you know, heavily from Sartre. It goes all the way back. But you know, the reason why I was like, oh, I'll do moral psychology, you know, reading Williams, where you could just see that, like, he has these emotional experiences where I'm like,
right.
Me too, you know?
Yeah, because sometimes, I mean, you'll see philosophers write about the emotions in a way that's detached, and and it's almost almost a more literary kind of account that just more effectively captures the richness of the experience.
Yeah, so you know, so circling back to Martha Nussbaum, I mean, and you know, and Williams too. I mean, a lot of the philosophers that I admire, it's such a difficult question, I think, to know what to do with literature and philosophy. It's just constantly antagonistic. I think not necessarily. Anyway, I think for the rest of my life, I will wonder about what the relationship between literature and philosophy is. But I definitely think it's right that there's something that philosophers get when they maybe don't explicitly like go searching, you know, like go read Dostoevsky because they're like looking for like a particular example that fits a theory. I mean, no, I mean, if you read novels, you just get your perceptions are just made so much richer by good literature. And you know, and like I think there's an interview with Williams where someone's asking him like, what do you want philosophy to be, or what do you want ethics to be? He really thought ethics. But I think Murdoch, so this, you know, Iris Murdoch, my other love in philosophy, she expands it to almost like all of philosophy. But the thought is something like, well, what do you want philosophy to be? You know, and he wanted it to be richer, he wanted it to be more interesting, he was so bored by it. I'm often bored by it. But, you know, one thing he says is like, you know, it should be like, you should still have structure, should still be general and abstract in a certain respect. But then he just compares it to a painting, I think a painting by Monet or something like that, where it's something like, yeah, there's structure there, but there's just this richness and you know, complexity, and you can't, philosophy cannot describe something all the way down. I mean, that's not what it's supposed to be doing, but it can kind of hover and keep an eye on things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So pivoting a little bit here. So you recently did an interview with the American Philosophical Association.
Yeah, I did.
Also forthcoming?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were asked, what do you think is underexplored in philosophy?
Oh God, what did I say?
People should think more about the question, what exactly makes a philosophical view deep or shallow?
Oh Lord.
And so.
Do I have to think about it?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, oftentimes in like office hours, for example.
Yeah.
I'll, you know, give an account or something, or talk about someone else's view, and my professor will say, that's not a very philosophically rich way of thinking about it.
Richness is different though, right?
Maybe you can make these differences clear for me, but oftentimes when I hear someone talking about a view being deep or shallow or rich or or like blatant or something like that, I'm skeptical, because I just wonder whether it's their bias that's kind of just coming out, and it's like, this is just not the kind of approach that they like. But at the same time,
yeah.
Like, I think it's very easy for, especially undergrads, to like acquire certain philosophical tools or analytical tools and then just apply it all the time, and then like not think more deeply about the material. So
yeah, right.
I do think it's a legitimate question. So what do you think makes a philosophical view deep or shallow?
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
okay,
I don't know. I mean, this picks out a lot of different things. I mean, I asked it sort of cavalierly in that interview because I don't know the answer to it.
I wasn't sure if you were asking like or you were saying that in a kind of like, people need to think more about when
Oh, like it's a
deep or
diss?
shallow. Yeah, something like that. Or
It
not,
might have
not
been.
necessarily a diss.
It
but
might
just
have
like
been. Bilal, I wouldn't
there are
put
a
it
lot of
past
views.
me.
But yeah, I also
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I get in a bad mood and sometimes like I read a paper and you know, and it's written by, okay, I'm gonna restrain myself a little bit. Sometimes philosophers will say things and they mean them sincerely, but their theory has driven them to say something that a child knows is false. Maybe that's one way of putting it. And the theory and the backing in the theory, I love theory, you know, but sometimes what happens is that the theory gives you a false confidence that what you're saying is something deep.
Okay.
And I think that if you're saying something, if you're driven by theory and you're saying something that your child would never think, that you would never teach your child to think, that if you saw some parent walking around telling their child that you know, you shouldn't intervene, but you might go, uh-oh, that's not depth, you know, that's not depth, so.
Right. I have some guesses as to who you
Don't.
might name, but I'm not going to name them.
Don't
so
you
I don't
dare.
upset anybody. But, okay, the last couple questions. So,
Okay.
I know what your favorite philosophy book is, right? It's Bernard Williams.
Oh, I don't know if that's my favorite. I mean, that's a...
It's one that, as you said in the interview, changed your life, right?
Yes. So that, yeah.
So
which could be good or bad, Bilal. So I don't know
true.
if that's...
But I know you like
my
Bernard
favorite.
Williams,
Yes.
so,
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could only have one philosophy book,
Jesus.
or only read one philosophy book for the rest of your life, but it has to be a book whose arguments you disagree with, for the most part, what would you read?
Arguments that I disagree with, and I'm stuck with it. But I mean, but there's so which argument? What?
There's something about the book that you fundamentally disagree with, but you
The
never.
Republic.
Okay. That's a very safe answer, I think.
Yeah, The Republic.
Okay.
I love The Republic. There's something about Plato I love, and then there's something about Plato that I find absolutely intolerably abhorrent. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah, and it was probably the first like philosophy book that I read. So
okay,
it'll follow me around for the rest of my life.
All right.
Yeah.
And then last question.
Okay.
What do you want to be remembered for in philosophy, or in general? In general.
Oh God. Like a big thing or a small thing?
Up to you.
Oh God. So I teach this course on death that you've taken, and this last semester I was feeling very, you know, because I'm going on leave and I'll miss all the students, and I feel increasingly pressured by time commitments and things like that, and so there's a respect in which I'm relieved to have time to, you know, work on my book and do these sort of fun things, but it's sad to not be teaching for a while, especially since I love the students here so much. And so, as a sort of goodbye letter, I sent to them this poem by Mary Oliver, the poet American poet. She's recently died, and you know, you have to be in a certain mood to be feeling Mary Oliver, but I was feeling it. It's a poem called "When Death Comes," and there's a lot of lovely lines in it. And she says, you know, when death comes, I don't want to be full of arguments. And so, yeah, can I just look it up? Is that okay? Yeah, it's just something, I don't want to mangle it because it's just, she's a poet. I really better not mangle it. And I won't read the whole thing. People can go do their own homework. But
sounds like a poem that teaching a class on death would put you in the mood for, right?
Yeah. Okay. So here. Okay. All right. So here's a little line from it. So, and therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, And I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does towards silence. So I guess, and then it goes on, and it's really lovely. And I guess I don't know that I want to, like, I don't know that I want to be remembered for anything. Like, my fear would be that I forget people. Like, I think that for some reason that's very terrifying to me, that like I forget people, and that I forget even, you know, students, even if I don't really interact with a student very much at all, but if I read something and they wrote it and it was honest and vulnerable, like the thought that I will forget them. I mean, that's just, I've realized this over the years of teaching. You just forget these students. And so part of my goodbye letter was to say, look, it's a weird thing about human nature, is that we had this moment and I will forget you. But please come say hi to me. Like, if you see me somewhere, please come say hi to me. Remind me where I know you from, because I'll probably like remember your face, but I won't remember your name. And so, yeah, is that an answer?
Yeah,
Okay.
spoken like a true philosopher, I think.
You're cute, Bilal.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yao.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for watching, everybody.
Thank you.
See ya. Okay, cool. Weird ending, but.